Yeah, the Carla Wild's always bringing me home. Carla Wild's always bringing me home. Carla Wild's always bringing me home.
Hello, wild ones, and welcome to another episode of the Find Your Wild podcast. I'm so excited to have Dr. Carla Ionescu. Is that how you pronounce it?
Ionescu works. Yep, Ionescu
Uh,
works.
okay, because I'm not the best at pronouncing things, so I'm sorry if I totally butchered that. I'm so excited to have you here today. You are an expert on the goddess Artemis, as well as you host an amazing podcast called the Goddess Project, and you're also mapping out different sites of Artemis. So I can't wait to. I'm so excited to chat with you today.
Thank you so much for having me.
Of
I
course.
love talking about Artemis all the time, so lots and
Yes.
lots of things to talk about her.
Yeah, and your podcast is amazing. I love how in depth it goes into not just Artemis, but so many other goddesses and subjects that are so relative and awesome to listen to. So if for everybody listening, if you want to just give like a little bit of a background on more, like, I know I kind of explained it a little bit, but how you got started doing that, and how Artemis kind of called to you.
Oh, okay. So those stories are a good like 15 years apart. Yeah. So the easiest story is the podcast because I teach at the University of York and I would have these conversations with my students sort of after class and between class about things that were just, let's say, sort of connections that were perhaps not fully published or things sort of outside of academia. And when COVID hit, I was like, well, I really like talking about this. And I think I could talk about it for a bit on a podcast and see if anybody's interested. So it was just a way to like, well, all of my findings and connections and, making sort of theories and using academia, but also, so it was a fun thing to do. It is a fun thing to do. Unfortunately, I haven't had time to put much up there, but I'm getting ready to do so when I get back to Canada. So when you travel, it's sometimes hard to maintain the podcast. So that
Yeah.
that was recent and it's fun and I'm looking forward to it. Artemis is that I mean that's a longer story. I'm now realizing that she might have been in my life way before I knew of her in the guise of the Virgin Mary because I grew up very Catholic and the Virgin Mary played a very key role. And then when I went to university, I actually took one of my degrees is in religious studies. So I was
Mhm.
taking biblical studies, Judeo-Christian studies to study the Virgin Mary. And that kind of cracked open um, my belief, my faith. I went through a moment of transition. You know, they call it like these tower moments. Literally, it all came crumbling down because when you're reading and studying the historical data, things can become clear that were perhaps unclear before.
Right.
And so, um, and so from there, I began tracing the Virgin Mary back, like, okay, so who is the influence for her, so to speak? Who is that? Who is behind some of the symbolism, etc.? And I kept bumping into Artemis, particularly Artemis of Ephesus, but then Artemis overall. And then I was like, wait, the Greek Artemis is like this, but then Artemis of Ephesus is like this. And I kind of would get lost down these rabbit holes of research, looking for research, to be honest, because there wasn't very much. There was a few good things, many things in several languages. So it was challenging to find stuff about her. And so
Yeah.
when you get your PhD, I decided I would go do my PhD. They want you to propose a piece of work that hasn't really been done before. So it has to be something unique. And so Artemis was like, not that she hasn't been done before, but not in the way that I was going to work on her.
Right.
And I think from that decision on, she started just showing up in my life. Like she would show up in a piece of art somewhere where I wasn't expecting her. She would show up when I went somewhere, something about her or her name or something would come up. To such a degree that I remember telling a couple of my colleagues, my fellow grad students, like, I don't know, I have this, weird sense. Like she just keeps showing up all the time, and I just keep getting drawn into this research. And I'm like, when I'm in the research, I like forget the world exists, you know? And and one of my colleagues said, "Well, you know, Carla, that's pretty unusual. You should really go with that. You should really follow that." Um, and so I did for a decade or so, almost 15 years. I did all my work. I did, of course, my dissertation. I graduated. Um, but I would say she came more forcefully into my life in the last few years. Um, when I decided to write the one book, now I'm writing the second book. And when I made, I think, more of a commitment to her, and I finally went on social media.
Yeah.
I mean, I was on social media personally, but not professionally. And when I was publishing the book, I had to go on social media to promote it, and women and men, I mean, people just came out of everywhere to tell me how much they loved her and they connected to her. And I think it's been like a, sometimes in life it looks like it's slow motion and then it's fast and it's slow motion. And I feel like the last 3 years have been like she just dragged me. She just dragged. So yeah,
Yeah, she's like, you get it now. Okay, let's keep going.
exactly.
I got work for you.
Exactly. Exactly.
Yeah. Because
Yeah.
like your unique perspective on that and your unique like focus on that, I feel like, she definitely saw that and recognized that and was like, okay. um I love also like your way of working the spiritual in with the historical and tying it all together. It's so beautiful.
Yeah. I think because I spent so much of my life being a devotee, and when I did look at the history, it hurt me, that I think it's very important for me that I present historical facts with my own, let's say, spiritual experience. So I don't know, it feels like it's my responsibility to be like, so this is the history, this is how what happened, this is how it happened. I am connected to it in this way from the heart. But I don't know how to explain it. I feel like I wasn't told that, I guess, when I was young, certainly not by the Catholic
Right.
Church.
Yeah, right.
Um, and yeah, and maybe if I was, the those moments of clarity wouldn't have been so devastating. Because I was devastated for a couple of years. I was completely like, I don't want to talk about it. And in fact, uh, I would do a lot of my studies and my presentations, and I was quite angry, in like all of that. So it felt like a bit of a betrayal. And so for Artemis, I think it's a bit easier for me because she was never a human. She was always a goddess.
Right.
And so you come from that perspective already, right?
Mm.
But and I think perhaps it's easier for me because the Greeks and Romans, especially the Greeks, they they saw gods as, I want to say I want to say collaborators, but maybe that's not the right word for them. But they understood that gods have favorites, for example. They understood that gods could be imperfect in some ways.
Right.
Um, so there's less pressure for Artemis to be everything I wanted the Virgin Mary to be for me. Do you know what I mean? Like there's less
Of
pressure.
course.
Uh,
Yeah.
yeah. And so that feels more reliable.
Yeah, that's a good point, is like the Artemis already comes, like especially the Greek and Roman gods and goddesses, like they kind of have a humanity to them where it doesn't seem like everything is so perfect. Because I also grew up Catholic and um did like very much relate, and I still feel like I do relate very much to the Mother Mary, but I can see how, looking at, like, you already know going into it that, oh, they have flaws and human like characteristics, that like even though they're gods and goddesses and powerful, there's still flaws there, so there isn't like this perfectionism when you're looking at them.
Yeah. And there's less submission expectations. And I'm not saying, I mean, the
Mhm.
Virgin Mary never said to me, submit, to be fair to her.
Right, right,
But the message is kneel, submit, be humble. you're a child, she's a mother. Like the message is always in this way, and it always was. And that's
Right.
all
Like,
right. It's all right.
yeah, kind of patriarchal in a way. Like there isn't that, like the Virgin Mary is this the epitome of like what a woman should look up to, and it's, I feel like she doesn't fully encompass sometimes the range of what women are,
Yeah,
and then I could totally agree with
yeah,
that. Yeah.
yeah. It's very parental, And I
Right.
think, I mean, perhaps when I was a kid, I don't know what I would have been like had I grown up with Artemis as
Right.
so Artemis to me feels like a mentor, an older sister, a divine being, but I always say that we collaborate on things. I mean, I'm trying to think of how does that make sense in my so she will ask for something or I feel like she's asking for something, but I don't know, I don't feel the need to kneel except when I was just in Ephesus. Okay. So I was in Ephesus a couple of days ago, a week ago. I've been in Turkey for 3 weeks. I'm in Turkey now. I'm at the
So
hotel.
exciting.
It's pretty awesome. And I had been in Ephesus a little bit before, but before I came this time, I had like a meditative dream. It's not really a dream, but a vision maybe, because I knew what the rooms look like. There's this black dark room with two statues on either side, right? Two Artemis statues on either side. It's
Hmm.
kind of a weird actually way to put them, but whatever. And I had this vision that when I walk in the dark room, I would drop to my knees. Okay. Which, like I said, for Artemis and me, that's usually not the way that we communicate. But there's something about Artemis of Ephesus that is just royal magnificence. And as
Right.
I was getting, and as I was getting closer to that, I thought, oh my God, like I'm gonna go to this museum. I really wanted to make it work, but I was like, I'm gonna go to this museum. There's people in the museum. Like I'm kind of an introvert and I'm a little bit shy sometimes, and I don't want people to
Yeah.
see my private space. Like this is a private thing.
Right. Yeah.
And and I was very lucky because we came my partner in the mapping project, Cassandra. So we came in November, which is pretty empty in Ephesus. And so there were lulls in the people that were coming through the space, this dark corridor that you walk through. And there was a security guard there. There was a woman there sitting behind, and I thought, okay. And there was a lull in the space, and I was like, I have to do it. Like I have to. I didn't have to, but I just wanted this vision
Oh,
to be a
called
reality.
to. Yeah.
Yeah, like I had dreamed about it for months in advance. And and so what I did is I pretended that I was kind of filming and kind of getting down to the bottom, and because that's sort of my shy self-conscious self, like a
Yeah.
nerd. And then when I was down there, no one came, and the guard was just sitting there, I think, or maybe she left, I don't know, because she was behind me. And then I thought, you know what? And so then I got on my knees and I just prayed and I just meditated and no one came. I don't know how long it was. I mean, I was in there. I was in the room because I was photographing everything for like over an hour. My friend was like, oh
Yeah.
my God. So I don't know how long I was there. But anyway, I did my little thing and I was just as I imagined it. I think the guard actually left because when I got up, she was no longer there. No one came. No one came. And then when I was done, I got up and then I was like, oh my God, like that is just a privilege, like such a blessing.
Yeah.
Um, to be fair, once I was on my knees and meditating and stuff, I wouldn't have cared if anyone came. Like, I think it was just the action of doing it that felt a little awkward to me if people were watching, but I think once
Sure.
I was there,
Yeah, to get into the moment. Right.
yeah.
Yeah.
So that is the only time that I felt that need. There's something about that statue that's called the beautiful one that is just, I don't know. Like it's not everyone, I mean, everyone has a favorite Artemis statue or a favorite thing
Right.
that speaks to them. Um,
Is
and I
that
like,
the is Yeah, is for people that don't know what that statue is, could you like describe it a little bit more? Is that the one with all the boobs on it?
yeah, so I was gonna actually pull it up for you. So
Okay, cool.
it's so they're not boobs, though people call them boobs, but they're
Okay.
they're bee eggs. In fact,
Oh.
The weekend just before that, I did a paper at a conference, ASOR, which is an archaeological organization. I'm just looking for the statue, on how these are for sure bee eggs, you know. So people used to say their
Oh,
breasts. Well, let me clarify. Men during the Renaissance, 12 and earlier, said they were breasts and depicted them with nipples. In actual fact, they have no nipples at all.
mm,
They call them protrusions, right? Then some
yeah.
guy in the 1800s said, no, they're bee egg. I mean, no, they're bull testicles, and they used to throw the bull testicles over the cult statue, which is absurd, absolutely absurd. And there's no actual evidence of that. Okay.
Evidence for that, right? Unreliable narrator.
What is this? Okay, so here, let me show you. And maybe the viewers can see this, but you could Google her. So this is called a beautiful one. And she
Oh,
has
awesome.
what she has on her head is the city. It's called a TK.
Mm.
And then she's got everything on her body. So do you see these bees? Oh, sorry. There's bees right here going up her body,
Oh,
and lots of
wow.
animals. And she has the astrological symbols on her body, like Cancer, Sagittarius at the top of her neck.
Oh,
Um,
wow.
yeah, I can send some of these to you, but I think they'll be on my Instagram. And you can Google it and
Absolutely.
see her.
I'll
But
I'll make sure to for viewers, I'll also clip this underneath so people can directly like go to your Instagram and see it. So that's amazing. What is there like a because I didn't realize, is there a particular significance to like the bees with her, or is it just that she's like of all wild beasts?
So it's a long story in the sense that, okay, so we know the bees because she has them on her. Bees and honeys have a long, long history that deal with prophecy, immortality, resurrection, long, long history of that. And there are legends, there's at least one legend that said that because the cult statue, so the original cult statue was made of wood and it was brought by the Amazons, we're told. This is a
Mm.
stone statue, it's a second century Roman statue. And on the wood itself, that bees started to create hives. So that's one of the legends
Oh,
around it. Yeah.
cool.
Her priestesses were called the Melisai, and so that means bees or bee priestess.
Mm.
Um, and there's this long tradition that bees, for example, fed Zeus when he was born. So bees play a fundamental role, one of the main symbols in ancient Greek and later Roman traditions. And so bees would bee eggs, when you look at a cluster of bee eggs, they look exactly like that. Yeah.
Very cool.
So that's my favorite theory, and that's the one that I'm supporting. I've also suggested that, so there's a couple of statues that have of Zeus, for example, Zeus Labrandaus, and one of Cybele that have normal body parts up here. For example, Cybele has like two breasts, and then
Right.
underneath they have like a triangle of these protrusions.
Mm.
And so there's been a suggestion that they're called cosmic sacs, that they hold galaxies or cosmos in them.
Wow. Cool.
Yeah, so I don't think that for Artemis of Ephesus there's so much evidence that leans into bees. And like I said,
Right.
her priestesses were named bees. Like there's a lot of bee imagery that's in
That
Ephesus.
leads to that. Right.
Yeah, at least that. And in fact, when I was standing in front of this statue before I got to the kneeling part, there was a group
Yeah.
of women there, American women that were traveling on a cruise. And I don't normally talk to people or tell them who I am, but they were asking questions. They were talking to each other. And I said, so let me tell you something about this, and that, because I couldn't help it.
Ye-
And
Yeah.
one,
I'm sure
and
they
one,
appreciated it too.
they were wonderful. They were wonderful. They asked me for my Instagram. They were wonderful.
Oh,
Um, and one of them was a beekeeper.
how
And so
cool.
when I said, so these are most likely bee eggs, cluster, and she went, "Oh my God, yes. Yes, yes, yes."
Oh,
She's
wow.
like, "I see it now." It's because, she had seen bee eggs. Not all of us see bee eggs. We usually just see the hives. We don't actually see the bee
Right.
eggs, right?
Right.
Um, but she did. And if you Google a cluster of bee eggs, you will see exactly that shape. So
Oh, that's awesome.
yeah.
Yeah. That's very cool. I love that. And actually I wanted to ask you, I don't know if you're familiar with the picture. I'm gonna show it to you.
Yeah.
The Have you ever seen like this picture? The Can
Yes.
you see? Yeah.
Yeah.
So that's actually the design on my one of my sweatshirts that I have. The And I call it Our Lady of Wild Beasts, but I figured I'd ask you about it. What do you know about it?
So that's the Patnia Theron, yes, the mistress of animals.
Yes.
Um,
Yep.
and that is a Bronze Age and sort of early pre-Bronze Age symbol. It predates Artemis. I think the
Mm.
one that you have there, actually, I don't know if that's the one that's from Crete. Um,
It says it's from Boeotia,
oh, from
if I
Boeotia.
pronounce yeah,
Okay.
if I pronounce that
Yeah.
correctly.
Yeah. Yeah, so the mistress of animals is always depicted as a goddess that's holding either two animals or has, these two animals on either side. To be academically accurate, there is also a master of animals,
Hmm.
but I usually ignore him. He's 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 less represented, I would say. But
Yeah.
and then in Crete, for example, the kinds so this goddess is unnamed. So she's just
Mm.
called Patnetheron, mistress of animals. And there are some theories that depending on the animals that she's holding, she may be embodying a, a different goddess. So in Crete, they had, for example, Britomardis, or Dictina, or unnamed mistress of animals. So what I'm saying is like they would have recognized based on the animals that sometimes they're geese, sometimes they're deer, sometimes they're a different kind of bird, sometimes they're panthers. And so we're told that perhaps the different animals would have, so she's sort of a multifaceted representation. But
Mm.
once the Mycenaeans colonized much of the world and the Greeks sort of came in, the Hellenics and came in and started naming the gods and goddesses for themselves, Patnetheron becomes Artemis very much, or Artemis becomes the mistress of animals, and that representation is often associated with her. Although I'm trying to think if there's one that is, well, there's some overlapping in some of the images that have Patnetheron will say maybe also Artemis,
Mm.
but that imagery predates Artemis's worship by, I would say, maybe 1,000 years, maybe more.
Wow. Do you
Yeah.
think that maybe led into Artemis or like possibly? Yeah.
Yeah, so, a goddess of the wild and a goddess of animals, and a goddess of the forest, goddess of the mountains, like that was very popular in the Bronze Age and the pre-Bronze Age and even in the Neolithic. So, for example, with Kaibeli, who of course predates even the Neolithic. So the idea of a female divinity that is in charge of the wild or the environment or whatever is very, very popular cross-culturally and cross-temporally.
Mm.
So Artemis really inherits that legacy. You know what I mean?
Right. Yes.
Um,
Hmm.
once the Greeks had a huntress goddess, a mistress of the wild goddess, they begin to associate her with all of those interpretations. Um, there's really no one else in their pantheon that has this responsibility. So she takes that up. Um,
Wow. Yeah.
yeah, but I would say she comes later. Of course, we don't know when. We don't know when she started. Like,
Sure.
so,
Right.
right? So my argument in the book is that maybe she was always around, but at some point they named her Artemis, although Artemis is not a Greek name. We don't actually
Huh.
know we don't actually know where the name comes from. There's different theories that break up the name into different parts, but um so a hunter goddess, because they were hunting for a long time, would have been already in place. Whether she was named
Right.
Artemis or not, we're not sure. Um, so I would say that she inherits, once she's named, she inherits all of that wild aspect. Yeah.
That's really cool. That's awesome. Um, yeah, like if you were to describe Artemis, I guess if you can, I know it's probably really hard, but like for someone that doesn't know Artemis or Like, if you had only 3 words, what would you use to describe describe her?
What? Hmm. Oh, that's a tough one.
An
Okay.
enormous task, I'm sure.
I would say for sure unapologetic,
Mm,
independent, and at the risk of sounding cliche, I would say something like wild.
yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, she's so connected. Yeah, and I feel like she really is unapologetic too. Like, the I forget what the guy's name was that looked upon her bathing and she's just like, no, you're gonna die now.
Yeah. Action. Action.
Action. That's right.
Yeah. Yeah. And she really, so her retribution is swift. And he dies in this horrendous way. She turns him into a fawn and he's hunted by his own dogs. And
Oh,
I really feel like if we interpret that myth from a modern perspective, that's really a myth of consent, in the
yes.
sense that what you've done to me without my consent puts me in a vulnerable position. And
Right.
so I'm going to put you in the most vulnerable position I can, which is you are now a fawn. You are the thing that's being hunted. You are the prey where before you
Yep.
were the predator. And I find that fascinating. I mean, I don't know that the Greeks would have seen that. I think I don't want to, sometimes we make these assumptions about the ancients. So um, I don't know that they
Right.
would have had this concept of consent. I'm going to lean towards no.
Right.
But they did have this idea that if you piss off a god, if you break certain boundaries, if you cross certain boundaries, gods are swift, violent, angry, and that's totally acceptable. Like,
Right. On their end. Yeah. It
yeah.
is like, and even that story, it actually it does, and I know this is another question I was going to ask you, so it kind of leads me into it, but like her relation to being a bear, it really reminds me of like a mama bear too. Like, obviously this he's looking at her naked, but like, if you would encounter a mama bear in the forest with her cubs, like, that's also swift action, like unforgiving, like, protecting. So those align a lot too. But she, like Artemis, when I was listening to one of your podcasts, I guess I didn't realize her connection with bears, and like she has like the followers that are little bears too.
Yes. Yeah, I always associated her with the deer too in the beginning. Although once you get to Braran or Ravona, you really see her bear associations very deeply there.
Mhm.
Um, and it's kind of interesting because Greeks didn't have a lot of bears. I mean, they had bears. They still have a few brown bears in the north.
Mhm.
But this symbol of they had more bears back then than they do now, though. Let me clarify, obviously.
Right.
Uh,
Yeah.
so they understood how bears worked, but I found it fascinating that she's associated with bears and all the symbolism that comes with that, which they do incorporate certainly at Buran. And that the only thing that sort of saddened me a little bit was that by the time we get to later Greece, um, the symbolism of the bear of the little girls seems to imply that at Buran, they shed their bear. So they're called little bears, and they go through this ritual where they shed their bear selves, their wild selves, in order to get married and become domestic. Um,
Uh,
and a part of me feels, and Artemis is in charge of this transition, blah, blah. To be fair, we don't actually know what happened at Buran
right.
for absolute certainty because none of the women wrote it down. It was passed down orally.
Mhm.
And so some of the men whose wives were bears at Buran wrote it in a few plays or in a few sentences here and there, right? So the men had
Right.
overheard something
Right.
or
Not
been
much
told.
detail. Not like through a second source, and
Yeah.
right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So there's great debate.
Absolutely.
Yeah, there's great debate about what happened there and things like that. But what's not in debate is her representation of a bear mother and that the little girls were little bears. So that's pretty evident in the inscriptions that we found there and things like that. Um,
Right.
so it's fascinating because bear mythology is so deeply connected to humans and to human mothering and protection and fears, like all of these, symbols.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, every time I see like a wildlife photographer, like some of the ones that really pull my heartstrings the most are the ones where like the mama bears are breastfeeding their little cubs, and like the way that they like the videos like of them just so fiercely protecting their young and going against these huge males and just fearlessly like protecting their young is just I can see obviously how we relate to that so much, like especially I'm a mom. I don't know if you're a mom too, but
Yes.
yeah, so I'm we can relate to the fact that we would do anything for our children, and it is a strong connection that I can definitely see
Yeah.
us relating to. Hi, wild ones. I hope you're enjoying this episode of the Find Your Wild podcast. This episode is sponsored by my clothing brand Femme Sauvage, and you can find a discount code and link in the description. So check it out. We have a lot of amazing designs, and $5 of the proceeds goes to different charities. So please feel free to check it out and enjoy the rest of the episode. Thanks so much. And it
Yeah.
also brings me to ask you about another video you did, the my Maenads. Is that how you pronounce it?
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay. And they kind of they stayed in their wildness, or at least for a little while, I guess, for people that don't know about Maenads. Would you like to explain a little bit more about them?
Yeah. Yeah. So Maenads were the companions, human women companions of Dionysus. And Dionysus is a god of revelry, let's say. And he's fantastic. He's actually the only male god that I can stand. He's the only male god that I will sometimes post on my Instagram, and I'm fascinated by him. And he's the only one that sort of, because he,
It's all right.
yeah, I mean, he has this entourage of women, and there's a wildness to him, and he is what we would call the irrational, the wild, the unknown. Now, the Greeks, by the time we get to the Greeks, the so-called civilization had created this divide between city and forest. And city was like the rational Apollonian, the Apollo, right? Who I can't even get started on Apollo right now. Um, right? But it's like the very rational, let's say, aspect of humanity lived in cities, so they said. And
Yeah.
in the forest or in outside of the city, because you got to imagine a lot of these cities are walled, that's where wild things happened, right? That's where the uncertainty, the mystery, blah, blah, blah. And that was the realm of Dionysus, who liked to drink, who liked to party, and he could be sometimes quite cruel and very, very nasty sometimes. So Maenads are his entourage. Interestingly, and maybe not surprisingly, Artemis and Dionysus are very good friends, because they're both in charge of that realm, right?
Right.
The wild realm, the
Right.
uncontrolled, the independent. And so Maenads would be usually human women who went out into the forest at certain times during the year during festivals for Dionysus, and they would drink and dance and party. And we don't actually know what else they would do because the men were not allowed.
Mm.
And so what we have is a lot of stories written by men that is their imagination of what took place. What would women do in the wild if they're drinking
Right.
and uncontrolled? And it's all women and this Dionysian god. And so a lot of the depictions that we see become the norm, the standard for Maenads, but they're all in the imagination of men,
Right.
right?
So we don't even know how relevant that is. Who knows? They could have been going out and been like, okay, we're going to go crazy, but we're actually going to go nap out here.
You know, they could have just said, hey, let's just spend the weekend here and get away from all of those men. Like, or,
Yeah.
they could have easily partied, Um, So there are lots of stories, and there's some very wild stories. There's some wild plays in which we are told that sometimes they would drink blood, or if a man sneaks up on them, like Pentheus, for example, in one of the plays, they tear him apart. So there's this. So
Mm.
in the beginning, let's say if we're starting in the early Hellenic period, there's nicer stories like they're wild, they're having fun, they're worshiping Dionysus, blah blah. As we move through the Greek Empire, as it crumbles and becomes the Roman Empire, the men stop really liking that the maenads or the women are out there partying. So the stories become more vicious, the stories become more subversive. Oh, I don't know if we should allow these women to go out there. Oh, blah 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 blah, until maenads become a negative symbol, and eventually it's
Mm.
totally banned altogether. So women cannot gather in the wild. Certainly they cannot drink together or do anything like that. So it depends on which period we're looking at maenads, but the sort of celebration that started out being awesome and supported by the entire community
Right.
becomes uh, unavailable to women after a time.
Yeah, it's like unfortunate the kind of cyclical nature of history where I ordered your book. It didn't come in time, but I have been reading this book too, The Once and Future Goddess,
Yeah.
and that goes into like the beginning of when we were much more matriarchal, and then it's interesting to see in many different cultures and stories how that matriarch matriarchal focus kind of breaks down and then becomes more patriarchal, and like you said, then the stories take like a negative twist because they don't want that to be accepted anymore.
Yeah.
um it's very unfortunate, but it's good that we're recognizing it now, and we can kind of, bring more light, or at least bring more light to the unreliable narrators that are telling these stories, and be like picking out the false truths that are like just accepted as fact when they're that's the hard part about history, right? Is like you got to go through and pick out what is, like, you have to like study the text and the context of what is being said too. It's like the person behind who's saying it or describing it or drawing it. So yeah.
Yeah, first of all, I love that book. Actually, it's one of my favorite, The Once and Future Goddess. It's a great book.
Yeah.
Um, and yeah, and so I teach courses through the Artemis Center, online. And that we just finished a course called Redeeming the Goddess. And one of the questions that kept coming up, because we were talking about this exact shift, this matriarchy to patriarchy shift, and we were looking at different goddesses. One of the questions that the members were asking was always, "Well, Carla, why did we allow that, and how did that happen, and how did they just take over?" And so
Mhm.
that's always a tough question to answer because it was so long and it was very insidious in some ways, and women participated in it in some ways, not really, of course, not being able to know that in 2000 years, we'd be here, right?
Right.
Um,
Right.
so it's really multi-layered, but I think it's so important that we are now, and we have been, but especially now, I feel like there's momentum building that we are reaching back. And the other thing that we have is iconography, right? We have a lot of findings, more findings. So I read somewhere that what the British Museum shows us in the museum is like 7% of what they have.
Wow. Yeah.
And the museum is massive. I mean, you need a whole day just to look at it.
Right.
And Maria Gimbutas, for example, when she wrote about the figurines, like she would say, in the back of the museum, there are hundreds and hundreds. And I was in a museum when I was in Greek, when we were doing the mapping, the phase in Greece there. Well, in one section of Greece, because we got lots more to do. We were in a museum in Messolonghi, and they had these three statues from one of the Artemis temples. And in the back, it says something like there were 500 of these found, or at least
Okay.
500 of them were found, or something like that. And I said to the woman there, the curator of the museum, I said, "Well, where's the 500?" And she said, "Well, many of them are in pieces. These three are the best preserved that we've got." And I
Mhm.
said to my friend, I said, "Imagine if we had 500 statues of art. Imagine if they did an exhibition where and there are thousands, right? But let's just say 500,
Right.
where they filled a room with 500 statues to the goddess. In this case, only Artemis. And you walked in. I mean,
Right.
the psychology of that, like the ancients, in a sense, lived in a very different psychology than we do because
Hmm.
the goddess was so supreme. It was visual for them. It was,
Right.
um, and I cannot think of one place where something like that is available, not only for women, but for everyone today, where you can walk in and see
Mhm.
these massive numbers of statues to one goddess. Like,
Right.
right?
Yeah, absolutely. That leads me into asking you too about your mapping project. So if you want to like explain and like how far you've gotten so far and like kind of where you're looking to go next, I'm very interested in
Yeah.
seeing that.
Yes, yes. I would love to share that because I want working on the mapping project has been quite challenging. So, okay, so
Yeah.
when I was a graduate student, I of course read all of Pausanias, who is a Greek traveler of the second century, and he's traveling around from temple to temple, and he's making records, and he's one of the most complete texts we have of the ancient world. And so I was always like, oh, Pausanias is like the earliest vlogger, you know. He really
Yeah. Yeah.
he really, and so I always wanted to walk in his footsteps, but especially for Artemis. But I really thought it was impossible. And in some ways it's very difficult because obviously not all the temples that he saw and others saw would be available because they haven't been dug up.
Right.
Um, and then I really can't remember how. I think I suggested, so my partner on the mapping project, who's also a board member for the Artemis Center, she's a retired lawyer and she really likes organizing and building these kinds of trips with things. And we thought, let's
Hmm.
go to Greece together, and I want to see all these temples. Let's go road tripping, through Greece, because I would really like. So what's happened is that either the temples, there's famous temples that are on the map, okay, but I know that there are so many more temples to Artemis. In fact, my argument is going to be that there's more temples to Artemis, certainly in Greece, than perhaps any other god, which
Wow.
I can't say
Yeah.
academically yet,
Right.
but I can say it enough to be like everywhere we went, there'd be a temple to Athena, a temple to Demeter, lots of temples.
Right.
There's certainly going to be way more temples to the goddesses than there is to male gods. That I can probably say more easily. But we would get to a place and we'd be like, okay, we know there should be a temple to Artemis here. Okay. And then when we get to the museum, there's like four other temples to Artemis,
Wow.
right? And we're like, these are not, because what happens is archaeologists will pick a site, they'll get a grant, they'll go to the site, they'll dig it up, they'll write a report, and then they'll move on to something else, you know?
Mm.
But what my issue was that no one has put it all together for us
Right.
to see it. And I like maps. I wanted to see it on a map. I'm using Google Maps so that when people travel, they might just pull up my map and go, "Is there a temple of Artemis around me? Maybe there is.
Wow.
Maybe I can visit it." Right? So I wanted
Yeah.
that part. I wanted to use my own pictures and I wanted to document my own stuff and I wanted to do all these kinds of things. And I think it's so when I started out, I thought of it very academically, but people have pointed out that it's become a pilgrimage. Um,
Mm.
it feels like, again, a responsibility that she wants me to do. Like we have
Yeah.
gotten into some sites. My friend is also very good at sending out emails saying, Dr. Carla Ionescu and I would like to visit this site, even though it's locked. Da, 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 da.
Yeah.
And we have gotten into so many sites. So that has opened the door for us.
Wow.
But I always think like that's her. I mean, because to get somebody to open the door for you in Greece, I mean, I can't even explain to you the bureaucracy of doing that, right?
Oh,
Uh,
wow.
it's yeah,
Difficult.
it's forever and you got to get through 15 people. And we've gone into places where it seemed easy. And we've got some feedback where they were like, oh, sorry, you should have emailed us like 6 weeks in advance. So we've added them to the list and we will email them 6 weeks in advance and we'll go back. But
Right.
so far, we've had one expedition in Greece, which is really a corner, which is sort of Corinth and a little bit of Attica there. And
Hmm.
we found 30 to 40 temples already,
Wow.
just in this little
Wow.
corner, okay?
Wow.
We are now in Turkey, so we mapped. I mean, in Turkey, the archaeology is a bit more obvious because it's kind of touristy, but we found
Hmm.
two extra temples that we weren't expecting to find. Maybe a third.
That's
I'll have
cool.
to look that up. So that's kind of fun.
Wow.
And
Cool.
yeah, and we'll be going back. And so this project will take me a couple of years.
Uh, yes, that makes sense. Yeah. And you want to like make sure you're, you know, doing it like well, just to travel in general, that's gonna take a lot of time.
Yeah,
Yeah.
money, you know. So
Yes.
I'm thankful to my Patreon supporters, and I'm probably gonna do something to do fundraising because I mean we are moving very frugally. We're doing everything ourselves, but still
Right.
moving, and so traveling and all that kind of stuff is costly. So time and money and finding the places like so. I want to do it now too because I have climbed entire mountains, right? Everything is high up on a mountain. Everything. There are places, for example, there are some outside of Sparta. Of course, there's a temple in Sparta, but there's some outside of Sparta where we had this little rental car and we were going up the mountain with the car on a Greek road, which is really just not even a dirt road. And
Right.
the car started sliding backwards, right? We're on
Ah.
the face of a mountain and the car is sliding because the car was like, no, no, I'm not going up here. So my friend had to get out and like try and navigate me to where we do this a lot. We get into places, but this one she tried to navigate me so we don't fall off the mountain, because you're right on the
Right.
edge. So we added that to a list of like when I'm going to come back with my backpack and my hiking shoes and do a 10, 12 kilometer climb to get to the site because the car won't take us there. Um,
Right. Right. At
so,
least you're more well prepared.
and not so hot. We were there in June. Now we're going to go in May, early May. So um,
Right.
I think it really has to be a mission of love and dedication
Yeah.
because people will say to me, I don't even know what you're doing out there. And I'm like, I don't know either, to be honest. I am driven to get to the site. And when I see the
Yeah.
site, it's just like, uh.
Yeah, I mean, it is amazing that like there are these topics that clearly people are so interested in, and like I can totally see how she called you to be like, you are the perfect person to kind of like unearth me and unearth all my sites and re reshare them with the modern world now too. Are there any similarities between any of the sites or like significant differences that you notice between each of them?
That's a great question. So similarities, so the sanctuaries tend to have, which actually helps me, they tend to have their foundations built in the shape of the stones are a certain way. So when you're
Mhm.
out in the forest and you have a direction of where you're going, sometimes it's really just a pile of rocks. But they're kind of, I think it's hexagonal, the shapes. So when I start to see that pattern, then I know I've hit the temple.
Mhm.
There's a couple of them that we've been told by some of the gatekeepers of some of the sites that it will really like. So the archaeologists uncovered the temple, then they collected the rocks that were there and just stuck them by a tree. So they'll be like, when you
Um,
see a pile of rocks, you've hit it. Great. There were a few sites that we found that there's just nothing. I mean, I would say so. After a while, you get a sense for how a temple is built because all the temples were built in very similar ways. They have a very similar pattern.
mhm.
There are some temples that were just a clear field and maybe a couple of stones. But based on archaeology reports, so we download archaeology reports, we translate them. So there's a lot of prep in advance. And then when we get to the
Sure.
site, we kind of figure out where we're standing on the site and which way to go, where it would have been, blah, 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 based on the archaeological reports. So sometimes it's quite challenging to find anything, and I have some pictures of just open fields that I'm going to post on Google Maps and just and on there I say to people like this is all there is. So if you want to be there, go ahead, but
But
you know,
there's not really anything here, right? But I
yeah.
still think that that's important, in the fact that, and it's so great that you're doing it in an archaeological, like, in an academic way, rather, being able to, at least say there has been evidence that there was a site here, or, you know, talked about, here's where it is, but there's nothing
Yeah.
really to see. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, and when there is an actual Artemis temple on the Acropolis in Athens, up, at the Parthenon there. And it's labeled on the map, but it's not labeled where the temple is, and that drives me nuts. So, because
Mhm.
you will see it on the map and go, "Oh, there's an Artemis temple here." And then you walk around and there's no label for it. There's a label for everyone else except for her temple. And so I took lots of pictures and I posted that on my mapping because on the website I have the whole map right there.
Yeah.
Um, because people go to the Acropolis all the time, and I'm sure there are many fans of Artemis that didn't know that her temple, you're literally walking by her temple to go look at the
Mhm.
Acropolis, right? So I feel like, I take that very personally. I want you to know you're standing there and, just feel that, I don't know, her her importance, you know,
Yeah. Yeah.
and just know that she's
Especially with what you're yeah, especially with what you're saying, with that there could possibly be more temples dedicated to her than anyone else, and it just is an unfortunate, it's an unfortunate thing, for lack of a better word, that, it kind of just goes to show the how matriarchy kind of got washed away, and then this super important goddess that probably had more temples dedicated to her than any other god or goddess also just gets, like, kind of pushed to the side.
yeah.
So, um that is that little tidbit is unfortunately not lost on me. So, it's really nice that you're able to highlight that. And she is just such a cool, badass goddess too.
She is, and so I would say some of the differences are her names. Like her names are always different, and I have a list, and I think I'm at 300 names for her.
Oh, wow.
Maybe more. I don't know, because I have a list in my notes, and some of it is like, okay, pretty straightforward. But some of it we found in museums and in other places, and um, so I'm very excited to put that list together as well. So her name, which tells me that different towns, because some of the names are attached to a town, just simply like that art, Artemis of this
Mhm.
town. But it just tells me that people saw her in so many different aspects and layers. And to be fair, that happens to all the Greek gods and goddesses. I mean, they all have different names across Greece.
Right.
But I'm convinced, although I can't prove it academically yet. I have to wait till I finish all of this, that
Right.
that her popularity uh, is unequaled, and I think part of that is that no one has really ever put it all together before, because it's just not something you really do. I think in academia, people ask me all the time, so are there other people doing Zeus or Athena? And I'm like, no, because most academics, they don't want to be climbing 15 mountains, you know? And
Yeah.
I don't. I mean, I wouldn't do it for Zeus or Athena or anybody else. I just feel somehow called
Called.
to
Yeah.
this thing, like I've become finding the temples, finding more temples. It's adrenaline, right? It's like, oh my God, okay, so how many do we have in May and how many can we so it becomes this thing and I can't really control it, so it's definitely a calling, I think.
Yeah, passion project for
Yeah.
sure. And it's cool that she is kind of calling you to all of the places where she was worshipped, and into the wilds and the mountains and all of the places where she lives and, like, is.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's fascinating to me. Sometimes I say to my friend doesn't climb. She usually waits for me. And I say, and I'm like, the ancients climbed all these mountains, like, because at the sanctuaries where they would have had the celebrations, which means you got to come up with food. You got to come up with the votive offerings. You got to
Mm,
bring everything up there pretty much.
right.
I'm just like, even if they had roads, and my friend's like, well, they had donkeys. Okay, even if they had that, the incline itself is so steep, or so long if you zigzag it.
Yeah,
It's a trek. It's yeah,
right. It shows how important that was to them.
yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah. And to be able to bring all of those things to prep and prepare and know when to go and to be like, okay, I'm going on this journey up to go see her and dedicate time and effort and, you know, be humble to her. Um it just is like, a very enlightening thing also to look at like people from the past. Like they get such a warped misconception or, you know, I feel like sometimes people don't know how to relate to people of the past too. So I think that, even with your research, just like showing how far it would take to even get to the temple, I think just highlights something about ancient people and their determination and like what was important to them and everything like that too.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, so I film myself going up a lot, all the time. Number one,
Yeah.
because I feel like I like talking to people while I'm filming and I'm not
Yeah.
alone. Uh, but I'm always out of breath, And I mean, I'm not the most fit, but I'm quite fit. I played roller derby for 10 years.
Oh, that's so
So
cool.
yeah, so I like the challenge, but I think even the most fit of the ancients would have certainly um been offering, the strenuous climb up there, I think is part of that
Yeah.
offering. Yeah.
Mm. Yeah. That's cool. That makes sense. Could you ever horseback ride up there? Like to any of the sites, you think?
I was on a TV show once called Man Tracker, where basically my friend and I, who were teammates in roller derby, had to run away from a tracker and he had to find us. Anyways, it was a
Oh my God,
reality.
that's so funny.
The reason why I bring that up is that we were in the British Columbia Mountains, which is the Rockies. Rockies?
Hmm.
Yes, hopefully no one's yelling at me. And so we were on steep incline, and he had said he had brought the horses up on that mountain looking for us, and he had said to me that these were mountain horses, and so perhaps, I mean, I don't know that much about horses. I like them, but I don't. Perhaps there are horses that climb mountains, but I don't know that the Greeks had them, to be honest. I think they definitely had donkeys. Um,
Donkeys, yeah.
yeah.
Yeah, I'm thinking to make it like maybe like a little easier and fun so when you're doing your videos you're not so out of breath and you'd be like, all right, well my buddy here, I horseback ride, so like, I always like when I'm on a trip or something, I'm always looking for ways I can sneak in
Yeah.
horseback riding and stuff, but just like a more adventurous way of connecting and getting up the
Yeah.
mountain.
No, I always joke that the only people on this mountain are me and the goats,
Yeah.
The climb is so steep and the mountains in Greece are unforgiving, I love mountains, I
Oh,
love forests. Just
yeah.
here, actually, in Turkey, in Priene, I climbed up to the Temple of Demeter, which was a bit of a climb, but I climbed barefoot
Oh wow.
because, first of all, I wore sandals, which was ridiculous. I should have known better. Uh, and I didn't realize that the Temple of Demeter would be high up. But the forest floor was covered in pine needles.
Mm.
So it was soft. I mean, yes, okay, there's rocks. I had to kind of, climb my way through. But it was soft, and I was like, I'm just gonna climb barefoot. In Greece, I mean, everything is sharp, everything is dry, every rock has these like blade sides. You cannot take your shoes off in any way and do something
Right.
like that. Yeah.
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 It's very unforgiving, and the rocks are, yeah, it's a lot to
Mm.
climb. Yeah. So even in
Yeah.
the mapping, in the map itself, I do put a little thing in there saying the level of difficulty to get to the site because I don't
Oh,
want
that's
people,
awesome.
yeah, I don't want people, yeah, I just want people to know what they're in for. Some of them are easy, some of them I don't know that I would do twice, to be honest.
Yeah. So when you're mapping, so you're in Turkey right now, you've done a little bit of Greece. what are some other places that you're looking to focus on?
So I'm gonna do pretty much all of Europe and some. I mean, I would like to do some Middle East sections. There's, for example, there is a temple in Jerash in Jordan that I went to, but I wasn't. I have photographs, but they're not as good as I'd like.
Right.
Um, Italy, of course, which is part of Europe. Um, Spain, again, part of Europe, the Balkans. So I think I'm gonna do Greece first, of course, because that's the heaviest. And then Italy is probably next because they worshipped her as Diana there everywhere.
Right.
Portugal, Spain, and then I might do Eastern Europe. The only thing with Eastern Europe and the Balkan area is the naming, because it's not always Artemis, but it's some kind of a wild huntress or something.
Mm.
So I'm gonna look into that and see. Um, and Turkey, like I said, and maybe there are some other areas where there would be a temple to her. Um, so I would like to do the whole world of Artemis eventually.
Right.
I'd like to write a book about different sections.
Yeah.
But we'll see. We'll see. I know there's one in Spain, a big temple that's standing, and there's one in Portugal. So some places only have left one or
Only
two.
two. Right. So
No,
it's not as extensive as places that are filled like Italy or Greece.
that's right.
But it's amazing her reach is pretty far. It goes Middle East and then Eastern Europe. Would you do like the top of Africa too? Like would you do is
If
there
there,
some in Egypt or
I'm not sure, to be honest. I haven't come across a specific one.
okay.
Um, I'd like to dig into that. Yeah, the resources are a bit. What I mean is that I don't know that there's been an archaeological dig
Right.
for
Yeah.
Artemis in those areas. And if there is no dig, so we have a couple of them, for example, that there's a dig for something else, like Miletus, for example. And we know that beside this temple that was dug for was a temple of Artemis. So that is something that I would go and do. But if there's nothing and nowhere, the modern world has really overlapped so much.
Right.
It would
That'd be
be,
hard to find.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. So it would all depend on the kind of data that we have. Um, and that I
Right.
can find. And so far in North Africa, I'm going to be in North Africa a little bit in Tangiers and Algeria in January, and I'll look at the museums and things like that and see if she ever comes up or if anything comes up that's close to a hunter goddess. There are lots of
Right.
virgin goddesses and fertility goddesses and aggressive goddesses, but I'll have to see some of those connections.
Right.
Um, so who knows? Who knows what she decides to show me at some point, you know? Who knows where I'll be? And she goes, "Oh, look, there's a statue of me in this place that you never thought that existed."
Go.
So,
Yeah.
oh, what are you waiting for? Let's
Oh, I love that. It's so cool. I can't wait to see the full map because I know you just kind of just got when did you officially start mapping?
I think we started at the end of June when we finished, and we're doing like a pinpoint, we call it, every couple of weeks, so we don't overwhelm everybody. So it's like we have a Word doc with all of the temples we found, and then I have some
Yeah.
more. Um, but we're trying to create like a bit of a pattern. And I guess part of my brain thing is like at some point my map is going to be so full of these pins that no one's going to be able to, it's going to be one of those maps that just looks overwhelming. So I
Yeah.
guess I'm taking my time sort of decorating it, so that it has an aesthetic.
Yeah. I love that. I love that. I'm very excited to see the full map when it comes into completion and following your journey. So I think that's like a great place to end and hopefully I can eventually have you back on when maybe you filled that map up a little bit more. Um I feel I had such a great time chatting with you. I feel like there's so much we could probably go into for another another time. So, just for everybody listening, if they want to follow you, your research, your mapping, just let them know how they can find you.
So across social media, so I usually use Instagram and TikTok. Those are my two favorite things. I make a lot of videos of Artemis as sort of an offering to the goddess. I take those videos very personally when nobody likes them enough as I do, and I'm like, this is my offering to her. Look how amazing it is. Anyways, so but I'm on all over the social media as Artemis expert. And the Artemis Center is artemiscenter.com. It's just that center is spelled the Canadian way with CENTRE. So it's just artemiscenter.com, and that's where you can see the mapping, the courses, anything else that I'm doing. Yeah.
Lovely. And then also, I just want to plug in your podcast, which is amazing, which has so much depth and insight. I mean, I could listen to it forever. So it's really amazing. It's called The Goddess Project, just for everybody listening. And I'll link all of those below, so it's a little easier to find you. But thank you so much, Dr. Carla, for coming on today. I had such a lovely chat, and I feel like I learned so much too, just from talking with you. So hopefully everybody that learned something cool today too.
Thank you so much for having me. And yes, I would love to totally come back and we can talk about all other things Artemis as well.
Awesome. Yeah, I feel like we just scratched the surface because there was so much to cover. But yeah, I can't wait to follow you. And thank you so much, everybody, for listening to this episode of the Find Your Wild podcast. And we'll all connect soon. Bye.
Flowing to the sea, I feel the energy of life force flowing all through me, and I'll allow it all to dance with my body and play, and no one could ever convince me to give my power